Good day everyone. So we are the group 8 and we are going to tackle about Carl Rogers' person-centered theory.
But first, let me introduce you. Who is Carl Rogers? So, Carl Ransom Roger was born on January 8, 1902 in Oak Park, Illinois. He is considered to be one of the most influential psychologists in the 20th century. So, he also believed in unconditional positive regard, meaning therapists accept clients without judgment. Next, we have here the two contributions of Rogers. First, he emphasized that the therapeutic relationship is the primary agent of growth. Second, he created a style of therapy that can be used by various helping professionals. So now uh, let's now go to our main topic. Person-centered theory is also known as the client-centered theory. This is a humanistic theory, meaning it believes every person has a natural ability to grow, find meaning, and reach their full potential. Uh, this is also a shared existentialism, a focus on respect and trust for the client.
So now, let's move on to the goals of person-centered theory. The person-centered theory, developed by Carl Rogers, has several goals. First, it aims to increase the independence and integration of the client. This means helping the person become more confident and able to handle life on their own. Example, a student feels scared to make decisions. The counselor encourages the student to decide for themselves. Later, the students become more confident and handles problems alone. Second, it helps people be open to new experiences, trust themselves and use their own judgments. The person continues to grow and learn from life. Example, a person is afraid to try a new job. With support, they learn to trust their skills and try it. They gain experience and continue learning from life. Third, this theory wants to create the right conditions for positive growth. When people feel accepted, understood, and supported, they can improve naturally. Example, a client feels safe because the counselor listens without judging. Because they feel accepted and understood, they slowly improve and grow. Lastly, it focuses on the person, not the problem. Instead of only fixing issues, it looks at the whole person and their potential. Example, student has low grades. Instead for only focusing on the grades, the teacher looks at the student's strengths and talents. This helps the students believe in themselves and improve. Next, third force, humanism versus existentialism. Humanism and existentialism are called the third force in psychology because they focusing on human experience and meaning. Existentialism says people feel anxious because life has no fixed meaning. People must choose and create their own meaning. Example, a person chooses job they believe is meaningful even if it is hard. While humanism says people are naturally good and have potential inside them. With love and support, they can grow and improve. Example, a student becomes confident when teachers encourage and support them. Next is the similarities of humanism and existentialism. Both humanism and existentialism respect the client's experiences. They trust that people can change. They also believe in freedom and choice. People are responsible for their action, values, and decisions. And lastly, both focus on personal responsibility, autonomy, and meaning life. So these approaches believe that people have the ability to grow, change, and find meaning, especially when they are supported and respected.
Moving on to the role of the therapist, which is necessary and sufficient conditions for change. First, we have the congruence, which means genuineness, one's behavior, congruent with emotions. So, ito ang pagiging totoo ng isang therapist, hindi siya nagpapanggap. Or, kung ano man ang nararamdaman niya sa loob, yun din ang pinapakita niya sa labas. So, kapag nakikita ng client na tapat ang therapist, or we have this what we call congruence, mas madali silang magtiwala, or the client will be congruence to you too. Or the client will will be trusting you on expressing what they feel, what they truly feel. Second, we have here the empathy, which means accurate ability to view the world from client's perspective, or putting your shoes on, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, or it's the ability to understand and share the client's feelings, thoughts, and perspective of another person. And third, it's the unconditional positive regard, which means acceptance or caring. So as a therapist, we also need to accept one another. So, example, kapag ang isang client ay nag-amin ng isang pagkakamali tulad ng pananakit sa kapwa o paggawa ng masama, like kahit na hindi halimbawa, kahit na hindi maganda ang naging aksyon ng isang client, you are still there to listen to him or her. Like, you will regard the negative side, and you will accept him or for who he is. Disregard the negative side. Moving on to the relationship between client and therapist in person-centered theory. So, the relationship is characterized by equality. Also, the therapist need not have any special skills or knowledge. And diagnosis and collecting background history is not necessary to the therapist. We also have here the process of therapy, which are listening, empathizing, understanding, responding to the client. Self-assessment is of primary importance, and also there are no specific stages to the process, as it is all about the client's own process of change and growth. Lastly, we have the aspect of person-centered theory, wherein the belief of the therapist should not choose the goals of the client, but instead help them define and clarify their own goals. For example, a client might say, I want to be happier. Then the therapist will ask open-ended questions like, what does happiness look like to you? So to help them, of course, define their own personal goals, such as improving a specific relationship or changing a habit rather than prescribing happiness-inducing actions. Like they will also use the process, or they do not just stick to saying, or they do not just say, they do not just use empathy, but also congruence, like that, and ask more about or dig deeper for them to define their own goals. Or overall, goals should be expected to change as the client progress through counseling.
Okay, so let's go to the process of therapy according to Carl Rogers. So, the process of therapy involves listening, empathizing, understanding, and responding to the client. This means that instead of fixing the person, the therapist focuses on deeply feeling the client's world without judgment and reflecting those feelings back. So, for example, a client says that they feel overwhelmed. Instead of giving a to-do list, the therapist says, "It sounds like you feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders right now." So the second one is self-assessment is of primary importance. So this means that the client is the best judge of their own progress. It's not about what the therapist thinks is better, but how the client feels about their own change. So, for example, a therapist asks, "How do you feel you've handled your anxiety this week compared to the last month?" rather than grading their performance. The third one is, there are no specific stages to the process as it is all about the client's own process of change and growth. So this means that unlike some medical models, person-centered theory is very fluid, that it follows the client's pace and internal growth rather than a preset manual. So example, one client might find clarity in 2 sessions, while other might spend months just building trust. There is no step 1 or step 2 checklist. So let's go to the aspect of person-centered theory. So one is the belief that the therapist should not choose the goals of the client, but instead help the client define and clarify their own goals. So here, to Rogers, the client is the expert on their own life. The therapist help the client discover what they want rather than imposing societal or professional expectations. So example, if a student is failing, a therapist won't say, "Your goal is to get an A." Instead, they will help the student explore if they actually want to be in that major or what is blocking their motivation. So the second one is goals should be expected to change as the client progresses through counseling. So this means that as a person grows and gains self-awareness, what they initially thought they wanted often change or shifts. So for example, a client might start attending therapy to change, but as they grow, their goal might change also because they find a career that aligns with their values. So overall, Carl Rogers believed that human qualities like empathy and unconditional positive regard are more powerful than technical tricks or psychological diagnosis. So that's all, everyone. Thank you for watching, and also thank you for listening.